for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe d'année pour les Canadiens. Le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. LaBita.tv. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, good Wednesday night, and welcome to the Sick Podcast for all of you watching on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. Thank you very much appreciated. Craig Button, TSN hockey analyst, director of scouting, to join me in a couple of minutes, not before I talk to you about our partners and our sponsors, starting with Energy Transportation Group. Once again, a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. You see that fridge behind me? That is La Bite TB, brewed in Quebec, a winner of a dozen international awards. La Bite TB offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. La Bite TB, embrace your true nature. Also brought to you in part by Playground. Playground, experience Playground like never before. Enjoy world-class poker, 900 plus gaming machines, weekly events, karaoke Mondays, comedy Wednesdays, live bands on Fridays and Saturdays, much more. Discover the latest additions, Etc. Steakhouse, Drunken Dragons, exquisite sushi, the Esperanto Cigar Lounge, and Babel Lounge's mezza and cocktails. Playground, your ultimate destination for entertainment, just over the Mercier Bridge, only minutes from downtown Montreal. Visit playground.ca for details. And, of course, last but not least is Accent Insurance Solutions. All insurance isn't created equal. You know that by now. You know where to find the right solution for you. You also know that by now. It's Accent Insurance, of course. Accent doesn't sell insurance. They shop it for you to find the right product right on the money, whatever your insurance needs, home, automobile, or business. And every time I see their phone number, I think of my buddy Sergio Valmeso, 363-3636. Call the Accent team today. That is their number. Once again, for your insurance needs, home, automobile, or business. Without further ado, let's bring him in from TSN. Craig Button. How are you, Craig?
I am doing fine on this Wednesday night. Tony, how are you doing?
I'm doing extremely well. I'm also, I don't know if I'm getting more mellow, but I'm even more relaxed now. The Canadiens are winning some games in a season that I wouldn't mind if they lose games, so that they have a better probability of getting a better pick. But where do you stand on that? Should I be, or should Canadiens fans be a little bit concerned about that it hinders their probabilities of getting a better pick, or doesn't matter whether they pick 6, 7, or 8, they're going to end up getting a really good one? Where do you stand?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, we look at a draft, and certainly Macklin Celebrini sits at the top of this draft. And then after that, I mean, you can look at so many different players. You can look at a dozen players, Tony, and every team is going to evaluate them differently. And every team is going to have a different desire for a defenseman or a winger or a center. And I think that dozen players, they all add intriguing things. And it's going to come down to what a team likes and what a team celebrates and going after it. But unless you're picking first overall and you're getting that what I call that foundational franchise center in Macklin Celebrini, I think the next dozen players are just going to come down. I mean, it could very well be a case, and this, I know that this could be a case. A team picking 8 might get the second guy on their list.
Yeah, that's a good point. In terms of pure skill, talent, when Connor Bedard went first overall, a lot of the hockey world said that Michkov would be number 2 in terms of pure skill, pure talent, and maybe some people would have him even ahead at number 1, but no one was going to pick him number 1. And as it turns out, he ended up being picked, I believe it was 7th by the Philadelphia Flyers. So in terms of pure skill, do you have Demidov matching Celebrini or maybe even surpassing him?
No, I don't. Wow. I mean, it's hard to put it that way. I watched Ivan Demidov play, and it conjures up images of Nikita Kucherov. Now, Nikita Kucherov is a superstar in this league. I mean, he's won the Hart Trophy. He's been a phenomenal player. He's done so many great things, not only in the regular season but in the playoffs. And certainly, it's hard. But I see Macklin Celebrini like Jonathan Toews. And so if you're sitting down and you're the Tampa Bay Lightning, do you want Toews or Kucherov? Well, there's no way the Tampa Bay Lightning are not going to say Kucherov. But if you ask the Chicago Blackhawks, do you want Kucherov or Toews? There's no way they're not going to say Toews. So I think they're different types of players. I think they're both players that help you win in so many important areas, but they do it in different ways. I don't think one is lesser than the other, but for me, what I've come to, and I'm really comfortable with this now, is I think Demidov has really pushed himself right to that number 2 slot. I will add this one more thing. I think Demidov at the same age is better than Michkov.
Wow, isn't that something? All right, okay. We're going to get to this a little bit later on because Pierre Maguire joined me yesterday, and we actually talked about the upcoming 2024 draft, and we talked about who realistically the Canadiens should pick, considering where they will probably pick, and I can't wait to get your opinion on that. But before we get to that, there's so much that we have to say about Cole Caulfield. I know you're the president of the fan club. I know Pierre Maguire is the president of the fan club as well, and I know so am I. So but yesterday he added to his list of accolades. He became the 3rd captain. Think about this when you think about the history of the Montreal Canadiens, Craig, and how many great captains and how many great players they've had. He became the 3rd captain last night in the history of the Montreal Canadiens to have a season with 30-plus goals and 70-plus points. He became the 3rd.
I mean, just that in and of itself, when you think about the history of the Montreal Canadiens, the history of great players that have played for the Montreal Canadiens, the history of great captains, legendary captains, and Nick Suzuki finds himself into that category of greatness. And Nick has so much more runway ahead of him to be able to make real significant impact on the Montreal Canadiens' success. And there's no question in my mind he's going to do that over the course of his career. And he's just every year he's just taken another step to demonstrate it.
Since the All-Star game, he has the 3rd most goals in the National Hockey League behind Austin Matthews and Zach Hyman. Once again, pretty good company.
Again, you think about where the games become a little bit harder, a little bit more demanding. And people say, what do you mean for the Montreal Canadiens are demanding? Well, they're demanding because it's, that your chances of making the playoffs are just about zero, in mid-February. And the other teams are gearing up against you, and they're giving you your best. They're trying to gain points against you. So those aren't easy games. And now Nick Suzuki is performing at a level that's beyond impressive.
Okay, so here's another impressive stat. In the last 25 years now, Suzuki last night became the 5th forward in the last 25 years to hit 70 points. Koivu did it twice. Kovalev did it once. Plekanec did it once. And Max Domi, his first year after getting traded to the Canadiens from Arizona, had a season of 72 points. So he did it once. But last night when that stat came out on social media, like a lot of people were, as much as they were happy for Suzuki, they were really upset by that because it's the Montreal Canadiens. And they've only had 5 guys to hit 70 points in the last 25 years. And there's a bunch of other teams where obviously that has not been a problem. Connor McDavid picks up over 70 points every year. Austin Matthews picks up over 70 points every year. Kucherov picks up over 70 every year. Sidney Crosby picks up over 70 every year. Like I can play this game until I'm blue in the face, but I'm going to stop now. What does this say to you? I tell you, Craig, Suzuki became the first Canadiens forward to hit 70 points, the 5th in the last 25 years, the first to do it in the last 5 or 6 years, the second to do it in the last 15 years. You hear this, you think what?
Well, you think it's a long ways off from the Flying Frenchman. You think it's a long ways off from the prolific offensive teams and the offensive players the Montreal Canadiens had, seemingly just one fold the other, fold the other, fold the other, fold the other. And really what it tells you is there's been a fall off in the talent acquisition for the Montreal Canadiens. It's as simple as that. How often, and you know, Tony, you were right at the forefront of it for a lot of years. How often was a discussion centering around, you have a world-class goaltender in Carey Price. What are they doing to take advantage of that world-class goaltending? And certainly you never worried about defense, but they didn't have enough offense. And you know, when you had Ken Dryden and you had Jacques Plante, you didn't worry, and you had Patrick Waugh, you didn't worry about your defense because the goaltending was outstanding. But even if you go back then, their offense was still really good. It wasn't like they were winning games 2-1. They had the great offensive players. So for the last 25 years, what it's been, and it's simply there, I think it's an easy answer, is that there hasn't been enough talent. There has not been enough offensive talent on the Montreal Canadiens roster. And certainly people will say, well, geez, you wasted Carey Price's brilliance and maybe some other opportunities. Skill matters. And Scotty Bowman told me this when I was managing in Calgary. And he just said, he goes, you know, skill and offensive ability is something that is you can't teach. Players have it. And when you don't have it, it really becomes noticeable. So when you have it, he said, nurture it, develop it, grow with it, test it. Don't give it away.
The Canadiens' draft record in the last 20 years, it's been up and down. It seems like there were a lot of singles, a couple of doubles, and there weren't too many home runs. Mind you, the 07 draft year was by far the best with McDonough and Pacioretty and Subban.
Yep.
Sergachev at number 9 was a very, very good pick. It's clearly not Trevor Timmons' fault that the Canadiens traded him to acquire Drouin. Caden Gooley at 16 was a very good pick. Carey Price at 5, and there have been others. But there were some strikeouts, like Kotkaniemi at 3 and like Galchenyuk at 3. Louis LeBlanc was not a good first-round pick, with all due respect to him. Neither was David Fisher. Neither was Nathan Beaulieu, and neither was Jared Tenorti, and neither was Michael McCarron. And there have been some other strikeouts as well. Talk to me about the profession of scouting. Like what? It's probably an impossible question to answer. We're probably better off even figuring, you know, the recipe to the caramel bar before we can answer this. But what, in your opinion, is the secret to scouting and the keys to putting together a scouting department that'll have a pretty good hitting percentage?
And I think I like the way you finished that, hitting percentage. You know, in baseball, if you hit the ball for a hit 3 out of 10 times, you're going to be a Hall of Famer by all intents and purposes. So I think the NHL draft is very similar to that type of analogy. I remember talking to, I don't remember, I talked to George McPhee about this a few times. He said teams, and he said he went through it in Washington. He said teams become paralyzed in the early part of the draft of being afraid to make a mistake. So what they do is they tend to go safe. Okay, who are the players that fit into a group? Who are the players that, you know, are in this group? And he says you're hesitant to take a chance in that part of the draft. He says, but you get past 10, and he said it opens up a lot of different opportunities. He said, did we think that Alexander Semin would be a really good offensive player? Yeah, we did. He said, if we were picking 6, he goes, I'm not so sure we would have had the same type of ability to just be bold. He said, Kuznetsov. He said, we knew he was a good player. If we were picking 10, or in the top 10, we probably wouldn't have taken him. He said, John Carlson was a great defenseman, offensive. And he goes, all we kept hearing about was, yeah, but his defense. Yeah, but this. And he said, you know, and we just said, well, wait a sec. We're picking, I think he went 27 or 26, 28, something like that. And so George, I think really nailed that part about playing conservative, playing safe in an early part of the draft. So where do you get high-end players? Usually in the early part of the draft. So this is the first part of my answer. So being bold and like, how does Quinn Hughes get to 7? It defies logic. How I mean, Quinn Hughes is, I mean, if you watch Quinn Hughes, you knew he was brilliant. You knew he had the puck all the time, and you're just saying, but again, like, oh, we can't take him. He's only 5'9" and 3/4. He's this, he's that. And you talk yourself out of players. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it too is that projecting where you think a player can be based on what you've watched a player be. That's a hard thing to do. Everybody can go and watch a game and say, geez, he was a good player, or he didn't play very good. But the job of scouting, especially 17 and 18-year-olds, is trying to project that out. And I think scouts do that. But I think that you cannot get tagged with what you just saw. And David Pastrnak was a great example of that. David Pastrnak came to the U18 tournament in 2014. He'd been playing with a bad back. He had a bad back, and everybody knew he had a bad back. But he did the best he could for Czechia. Couldn't find a way to be successful. He falls to 26 based on what I call what you saw last is what carried too much weight in your decision making. And I think you got to be careful with that. You got to be careful on the good and the bad of that. The process of scouting is a longer term, like, okay, where did he start? How's he progressed? Where's he at? What do you see? And I'll finish with this, Tony. I think you got to look at scouting and look at players with a sliding scale. Okay, what's the best you think he could be? What's the minimum you think he can be? Where does he fit in? Does a player only have one outstanding skill? Because if a player only has one outstanding skill, he better be absolutely brilliant and best in class in that one skill. You need more than one skill to have success at the NHL level. And I think at times, like, you get that with players. I'll finish with this. There was a player.
Take your time.
Okay, Michael Holmstrom was his name. I'm pretty sure his name was Michael Holmstrom. Holmstrom was his last name. He was a 6'3" Swedish player, skate, handle the puck. I mean, he was just, gifted. The talent oozes out of his body. What didn't ooze out of his body was a competitive spirit. So, you're watching him, you're talking to your different different scouts, and in our group in Dallas, it was consistent. Anyway, we're at a European international tournament. First day, nothing. Second day, nothing. First period of the third game, well, 3 games, nothing. Second period, he grabs that puck and he dazzles and he takes it and he shows off every single one of those outstanding skills he had. I remember we were sitting there, and I remember a scout from another team came past us. He goes, well, that Holmstrom, he goes, I'll tell you what, they showed you all you needed to see on that one shift. And he left, and we were sitting there, and we just looked at each other, and we started to laugh. Yeah, he showed you exactly what he isn't. By his one great play, and that's where they got hung up on it. He was a first-round draft pick to Anaheim. Never could play in the National Hockey League because he didn't have the competitive spirit. He had this, but that's an example of getting caught up in something that you wanted to believe. You got to evaluate it over.
Frank, can it be that scout was trying to reel you in to see if he can sway you towards Holmstrom?
Well, we weren't good. This was in February. We were not going to be swayed in. I remember, Tony. It was a draft. I'll tell you exactly where the draft was, or the draft year. It was in 1994, and we were sitting there. And Jason Bonsignor was a player that was looked upon as somebody that had skill. He was big, he was rangy, he was talented. But our assessment in Dallas was he wasn't very competitive. We were a little. We weren't picking till late. We weren't even in discussion. But we're doing our list. And we're getting there. We're trying to work on our list, and we're in the conversation about Jason Bonsignor, and we're in it. We're talking about it. And, wow, we got to get him on our list. And I'm thinking to myself, why do we got to get him on our list? Like, if we don't like him and we don't value what he has, and we don't think that he's got these qualities, why do we want? And we weren't saying that he wouldn't make it. We just said he didn't fit our criteria. Anyway, what we ended up doing is we said, okay, whoever wants him on our list, go and write his name up on the board. Every single scout sat there and just looked it around, because what we did is we realized that, you know what, we were being in that space of like, oh, what happens if we don't have? But what we ended up coming out of that with is we said we had a separate list on our scouting rankings where we said these players have NHL ability, but they do not fit into our criteria. So we're not going to look at these guys. We recognize that they had potential, and so it really helped us kind of work towards the players that we liked and work towards players that we felt fit to what we had. Listen, I watched Nail Yakupov play for a long time. I watched him play as a young player. I watched him play in his draft year, and he was brilliant. And you know what I missed? I'll tell you what I missed. He didn't have hockey sense, and or not hockey sense to any great degree. And the reason Nail Yakupov wasn't able to play in the NHL was he didn't have the hockey sense to be able to take advantage of his. And he was competitive, and he could skate, and he could score. You can't miss those things. You can't miss things like skating and hockey sense and competitive spirit. If you miss those things, you're going to miss on players.
Why couldn't Pavel Brendel play in the National Hockey League?
Same thing. His was skating. He wasn't a very good skater, and he wasn't a competitor. Keep this in mind, Tony. The players you're drafting in the first round, the second round of the NHL draft, they've all been the best players at the level below them. They've all been you don't draft 4 goal scorers and go, well, I think he might score 50 in the NHL. You're drafting 50 goal scorers hoping they score 30. And the bottom line is that's why Pavel Brendel didn't make it.
You know, I got to tell you something. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I think the toughest thing in hockey is the job of the amateur scout. And I think the toughest thing about the job of the amateur scout is projecting. I mean, that for me is so tough, to the point where it's probably a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Every time I hear anyone with a scouting background talk to me about scouting, they tell me that you have to project. Everyone says that. And obviously, it's kind of like a fact. That's basically is the name of the game. But because projecting is so hard, are you not surprised that more teams don't just say, okay, you know what? We're drafting the best player right now at his draft year. Forget about the projecting stuff. Throw it out the window. Let's see what happens. How crazy is that?
I don't think it's crazy at all. I don't think there's one philosophy that carries the day, Tony. I think there's many different ways to be right. I'll share a story with the late Barry Fraser, who he was a great scout for the Edmonton Oilers. You look at all the players they drafted, and the first pick was Kevin Lowe, and they drafted Grant Fuhr, and you just go back and look at who they drafted.
Anderson.
Just go look at it. I mean, it's unbelievable, the different types. Anyway, what's fascinating, he told me about Paul Coffey. He said, I watched Paul Coffey play, and I said, if this guy can't play in the NHL, he says, I might as well just get out of scouting. Because he said he was brilliant. And he gave me this little piece of advice. He goes, Craig, when you get to that point in time of your evaluation, you'll stop going back to watch the player play, because he might not play so well, and then you're going to start doubting yourself. When you get to that point where you get to where you feel that strongly, just carry on. Put them on your list. Make sure you get them. And you know, the Edmonton Oilers were a great franchise. We know that. You just mentioned it. They never left their philosophy. They wanted guys that could skate, that had skill, and could really, really put up offensive numbers. If you look back and look at the areas where some of their players didn't make it, go back and look at some of the players that they drafted in the first round. They were all outstanding junior players. And I think it goes right to your philosophy. We're taking these guys because they can skate, they got skill, and they put up numbers, and then we'll see where it goes from there. It didn't work out for some of them. It worked out for a lot. Listen, they drafted Bonsignor 4 and Ryan Smith 6. So one didn't turn out, and the other one turned out magnificently. So they were true to their philosophy. And I think when I describe it that way for you, there was a lot of what you just said in their thinking and in their draft strategy.
Yeah, character and competitive nature two things that put Ryan Smith over the top, obviously. The Canadiens practiced today in Brassard. Doc was out there working with Paul Byron from the player development team, of course, before practice. Newhook and Savard had a therapy day. Tomorrow they host Marty St. Louis' former team, the Tampa Bay Lightning. And by the way, Caden Primo will get the start in goal. All right, okay. A conversation with Pierre Maguire yesterday was about small teams. I was actually very surprised today to find on social media that the Canadiens are the 6th heaviest team in the National Hockey League, based on the fact that they have a lot of players that are under 6 feet, like Suzuki at 5'11", and Newhook at 5'11", and Gallagher at 5'9", and Caulfield at 5'7", and RV Pinard at 5'9". The list goes on and on. But obviously, there's some guys that do carry a lot of weight because, once again, they're the 6th heaviest team. So I asked Pierre if he would have a quota on the amount of small players he would have on his team. We're going to get to his answer in a second. Before we do, how do you feel about a small team, and do you think small teams can win in the playoffs?
No, small teams I don't believe can win in the playoffs. I'm going to quote Brian Murray, coached in the league for a long time, was a manager in the league for a long time. Brian Murray said, hey, listen, it's great. You get a lot of good little small players. He goes, if you got a lot of good little small players, you're just going to be a good little team. Can't win in this league without size. Can't win in
it was him. He was the GM of the Ottawa Senators when they knocked the Maple Leafs out of the playoffs a couple of times. Was he not?
I believe he was. Yep, he was there for a stretch. They went to the Stanley Cup final in 2007.
Yeah.
When Toronto wasn't in the playoffs then. Toronto went a long time out of the playoffs. So I'm not so sure that that Brian was was the manager in Ottawa, because Toronto wasn't making the playoffs during a long stretch of that. But that being said, the small player has always had an opportunity to be in the league and to make an impact in the league. The thing is you can't have a lot of them. You can't have a lot of them. And too many of them, especially on the blue line, are going to hurt you. They're not going to help you. And that's not a knock. I mean, you're trying to find a balance. You're always trying to find where you can fit in with players. You can go back to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, 90s. The good small player always found a way to play in the league. What happened in 2005, Tony, and this was a big thing, and it's changing. And I, quite frankly, it's changing rapidly, is that in 2005, the league changed significantly with respect to the rule enforcement. So the bigger player that wasn't as good a skater, that lumbered, that relied on, the hooking, the holding, the obstruction, the way the game was played, now couldn't play that way anymore. So where did that give an advantage? It gave advantage to the more skilled player. And because the smaller player was always one that had been developed and allowed to be the skilled player, opportunity opened up in a big way. And so the league skewed a little bit smaller for a period of time, but also at the same time in that age group. So you start from 2000. So kids now are 5 years old. The bigger players started to be developed, and the bigger player now, if you couldn't skate, you couldn't handle the puck, you couldn't make plays, you weren't going to be able to just rely on grinding the puck and dump and chase and hook and hold. You couldn't do that anymore. And where do we find ourselves 25 years later? The bigger players have more skill. The bigger players coming in, and I see it all the time in junior hockey. The smaller players getting phased out because the bigger players getting developed. And it's the same thing that happens when you develop young people and you develop young athletes and all the essential areas of the game. Then you're going to get good hockey players. There was a long stretch of time where they just looked at, big player, you just grind down the boards, go and dump it in and chase it down, scrap, fight, do whatever you want to do, hit. Can't play that way anymore. And the big player has become a much, much more accomplished player and more talented player in hockey. And that disparity between the bigger player and the smaller player is only growing. The good small player will always have room in the league. But on the margins now, the big player is being developed big time.
Pierre Maguire last night on the Sick podcast with myself regarding small teams.
You go look at the roster of Vegas last year. I don't know their average height or their average weight, but I'm going to say it's over 6 feet, and I'm going to say it's over 195 pounds. You look at
Sure.
You look at Tampa when they were winning. I would say over 6 feet, over 205 pounds, probably. You look at St. Louis the year they beat Boston. St. Louis was a really big team. You look at Washington. I did all those games for 20 years.
Boston in 2011.
Yeah,
Boston in 2011. Yeah.
I did all those games for 20 years, Stanley Cup Finals, and you see all those teams. They're big. They're big teams. Small teams don't win. And people can say whatever they want about the numbers, and that. I'm just telling you, the small guys don't win, not in the playoffs. Not after you go through 3 rounds, you get to the 4th, and you have to play a game 7. Bigger teams more times are not going to win. They just are.
There you have it. Sounds like he and you are on the same page.
Well, I mean, keep in mind this, okay? So you have the regular season and skill and everything becomes exciting and players can play. When you get to the playoffs, 16 teams are gone. 16 teams are gone. The 16 worst teams are gone. So now the playoffs become about shrinking ice. It becomes about the ability to take away time from your opponent and shrink the ice. Well, small defensemen can't shrink the ice. Big defensemen can with their length. And Pierre talked about the Vegas Golden Knights. Like the template for winning in the National Hockey League hasn't changed in its critical elements. And when you consider that, you look at big defenders that can, with their reach and their length, and certainly you look at, let's go back to 21, Tony. And I'll never forget this. And I made the big comment at the beginning of the playoffs. Yeah. It was a very different playoffs. Montreal would be lucky to win 1 game. Well, they won 1 game. And then over the course of the next 3 games against Toronto, they lost 3. They scored a total of, I think, 2 goals in those. They had 4 goals, I think, in the 4 games. And they were down 3-1. But, you're coming into game 5, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what am I going to do? And I said, I'd watch game 4. You watched it from an analyst point of view. And I went back and I watched the game in game 4. And I saw what Montreal had done. First of all, they'd gone down to 4 defensemen. That was one of the big things they did. They said, we can play with Petrie and Weber and
Sherrod and Edmondson.
Said right. Sorry. Thanks for helping me out there. I knew who it was. And I'm watching game 4 and I'm going, geez, this is interesting. Like they're playing 4 player. They're letting Toronto have the puck outside the dots, and they're just going to say, come and try to play. And they had Carey Price. So now come and try to play inside on us. And so I'm watching game 4. I'm rewatching game 4. So heading into game 5, I said, listen, this is what Montreal is making an adjustment. If Toronto wants to keep, Montreal is going to be happy to let them do that. Well, Toronto didn't win game 5. And now I think that the belief in the Montreal Canadiens room just grew. And then they win game 6, obviously the overtime winner in game 6 in Montreal. And then game 7, they just stifled them. And then they did it all the way to the Stanley Cup final. And I think that was a great example of where understanding how you can utilize your size against an opponent that doesn't understand it. And I don't think Toronto understood what they were up against. And before you knew it, they were out. And I think that type of length, that type of size on the walls and the defensive side of thing, critically important to success in the National Hockey League.
So even though the Canadiens physically did very well versus the Florida Panthers last night, at one point there was a sandwich hit with Slavkovsky and Jackeye. It was something. And they out-hit the Florida Panthers. Pierre and I talked about the amount of guys on the Canadiens team that are under 6 feet tall that we just talked about 2 or 3 minutes ago here. And so it got back to the draft, the Slavkovsky draft, and that pick. And here's Pierre on the Canadiens drafting Slavkovsky and not Logan Cooley a couple of years ago. Better?
Yeah, but that's why when they took Slavkovsky, I know a lot of, and this is not a knock on anybody because I'm a fan of the kid. He's doing really well in Arizona right now. Everybody's like, Logan Cooley, Logan Cooley, Logan Cooley. I'm just telling you right now, I was doing the draft for a television network, and I said, no, they got to get big, man. They need big people. And it's like, as much as I think Logan Cooley's a really good player and an awesome kid, and he's all of those things, I don't think he's ever going to be as durable as Slavkovsky is. I don't think he's going to create as much mayhem as Slavkovsky does.
So, and there you have it. Yeah, but hard to argue with that right now, huh?
Well, no, and there's no way you can. And when you start to think about, where you're at as an organization, and certainly, you watch what Uri brings to the team, and you saw that. You saw where he was at that stage of the game, and certainly, that's become more evident. It's become more forceful, and with respect to Uri just being more comfortable and confident, playing the way he playing to his strengths is the way I would put it. And when you look at, you can look at any type of draft, and you can look at various different things. The Montreal Canadiens, and I'll go back in time, you think about different things that really led them to get to a different space. They won the Cup in '86, but they had made a trade for Bobby Smith up the middle of the ice. They'd lost some skill. They made a trade for Ryan Walter, big, heavy winger, a center, and winger center, and then and for Rick Green. That was back in the early '80s, Tony. Montreal got it. They understood again, there's always going to be room for the good small player. But you gotta compliment them and support them with bigger players, and you cannot have too many small players. And unless your name is Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar or on the blue line, small defensemen aren't going to cut it either come playoff time.
Well, Lane Hudson better cut it, because a lot of Canadiens fans are banking on him. But we'll
he's unique. He's unique, yes. Tony. He's unique, but he's going to need support. Lane Hudson is that unique player. I'm not trying to diss him on. I said I don't scout with a tape measure. What I do scout with is on unique abilities. When I said, if you're only going to have one great quality and you're missing essential other qualities, you have no chance to have success in the National Hockey League. You just don't. Yeah.
So get ready, because I'm going to ask you who the Montreal Canadiens should take in the draft, probably about 55 times between now and the draft. And so we're still a couple of months away. And now there's no real way of knowing who's going to pick where and all that stuff. So it's pretty hard to say who the Canadiens should pick. But let's just do a rather simple exercise, okay? We'll do a simple exercise. And the exercise we're going to do is, let's just say the season were to end right now, and forget about the lottery. The order of selection is where they are in the standings. So San Jose has the worst record, Chicago's second worst, Anaheim's third worst, Columbus is fourth worst, Arizona's fifth worst, and the Canadiens are sixth worst. And based on this formula, the Canadiens are going to have the sixth pick. Can you today, on Wednesday, April 3rd, give me a mock draft of the first six picks with these teams?
Well, I mean, it's easy. Celebrini goes number one, right? I mean, it's really easy. I mean, for me, Chicago? If you're the Chicago Blackhawks and you have Bedard, and I just talked to you about Demidov, I mean, that becomes pretty straightforward for me. Anaheim, I think that they can go any way you want. They can go with a forward. I mean, they have Carlson, they have McTavish, they have a lot of really good defensemen, but I don't think they have a defenseman like Zane Parekh. I don't think they have that defenseman that can drive play offensively from the blue line like Zane Parekh. They have some other really interesting defensemen, including Tristan Luneau, who has been cleared to play. Hopefully he gets in, gets close, gets ready, and gets playing for Victoriaville here in the Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League. So they have, but they don't have somebody. They don't have somebody dynamic like Parekh. So now we go to 4 with the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Columbus Blue Jackets, I mean, their scouting staff has continued to work and whatnot. I think that the Columbus Blue Jackets need a center. Like if I'm the Columbus Blue Jackets, they got defenders. I think they need a center. Now maybe they're going to move Fantilli back into the center or a forward. But at the same time, I think they could also use a big, strong, what I would call like a sturdy pillar defender. So from that end, I would take Sam Dickinson if I was the Columbus Blue Jackets. You got David Jiricek on the right side. You got Werenski. You're trying to think. Sam Dickinson is a really, really good player. So now we get to 5, right? And at 5, who do we have at 5?
Arizona.
Arizona. Arizona can go anyway. I mean, they took the huge defenseman last year, Shimashov. Could they take Silyev? Sure, they could. I also believe that they would benefit from drafting a center, potentially a center. Are there centers there? I mean, Caden Lidstrom is a huge body, and a big man that I think, to Pierre's earlier point about Slavkovsky, you think about somebody that can push and grind. And remember, they have Logan Cooley. Caden Lidstrom would be a nice fit behind Logan Cooley. So I would go with Caden Lidstrom to the Arizona Coyotes. Now, remember, this is loose, right? So now we arrive at the Montreal Canadiens. So where do the Montreal Canadiens find themselves? So they got lots of defenders. You can say about Lashunov. You can talk about Carter Yakimchuk, who plays. You got Silyev, the big excellent skating defender, but I don't think he's as good as Sergachev at the same stage. You have Konsta who's a really good player, but to me, he's a lot like Nick Suzuki. So do you want two Nick Suzukis? I don't know if that's a bad thing, but where could the Montreal Canadiens benefit the most from? And I think it's from a goal scorer. And I think the best goal scorer in the draft is Cole Yzerman. And so Cole Yzerman very well may be staring them right in the face at number 6. And I think Cole has put a lot of pressure on himself this year to show his worth. I told Cole this back in January. I said, you're only guilty of one thing. You want to be excellent every shift. And I think once he gets through the draft and settles down, I think Cole Yzerman reminds me a lot at the same stage of the game as Mr. Jeff Friesen. Jeff Friesen scored 50 goals as a 16-year-old, 50 goals as a 17-year-old, and maybe he came just short of 50 as a 16-year-old. And there was questions about Jeff Friesen. Well, at 11th overall, the San Jose Sharks took him, and he became a really good player. I think Montreal would benefit from a hard driving, excellent shooting. I think the best goal scorer in the draft, Cole Yzerman.
Pierre Maguire last night on the Sick Podcast with myself on who the Canadiens should draft if he's available.
Cole Yzerman is going to be a very intriguing commodity if he's still around. He's kind of sliding a little bit right now. For whatever reason, I don't know why. I'm just telling you, Tony, I've watched him a long time. All he does is score. There's still 1 point for every goal you score. You need to outscore the other team to win. And he can score. And I don't know what's gone on with the scouts in him, but something's gone on. I would just say he's going to Boston University. I don't know if Macklin Celebrini's going back there or not. I have no idea. Owen Powers showed that you can be a first overall pick and still go back to school and come out the next year. So I don't know if Celebrini's going to do that or not. I have no idea. But if he goes back to Boston University and Cole Yzerman's there, I'm telling you right now, they would have made a mistake not taking Cole Yzerman. I'm talking about Canadiens. If he's available when they draft. He scores. He's got good size. He's only going to get bigger. If you play with a kid like Celebrini, he can't help but get better. Tony, if you watch this guy practice, you would know why everybody's drooling on him. He is a special talent for his work habits, his athleticism, his shooting ability, and his hard work. He's a fantastic player, Tony. And so if you get a player that.
There you have it. There's Pierre Maguire. Cole Yzerman. Same.
Well, you may as well just end the segment now. Pierre raised something too. And again, you asked me the question earlier about scouting and what happens. So scouts show up and Cole Yzerman doesn't score, or he doesn't play as well as they want. Oh boy, so that sticks in your head, right? He is 9 goals away from tying Cole Caulfield's record at the National Team Development Program, 10 from breaking it. Now think about that. Cole Caulfield, that is, scored 126 goals. So you're sitting here with this player that's 9 away from tying that record. He's got 6, probably 7 certain games if they get at least to the medal round. Well, they'll get to the medal round. He's got 7 games left to get 9 goals to tie it. That's a record that before I saw Cole Yzerman play, I didn't think could ever be broken. And even if he doesn't break it, it's how close he's come to it. And I think that Cole, again, I just mentioned, I think that he's guilty sometimes of trying to be excellent every single shift, sometimes not taking what's there, just slowing the game down a little bit. Put him with a playmaking center, and I think he'll light up the net.
I was thinking about what we were talking about before, the size. Cole Yzerman's not small.
Ooh.
But I see what Iginla's been doing in the playoffs so far. He's not huge either, but he's a bit 6'1". We know how his father played. They say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. There's not too many people that have Tidge Iginla in the top 10 right now, but the way he's been playing, where do you think he'll be by draft night?
I see him as a top 10 player. I see him clearly as a top 10 player. I think he's outstanding. And so now I'm going to throw this one at you. The way he plays, he doesn't have the same edge as Brad Marchand, but he plays that game on the left wing like Brad Marchand. Smart, impactful, makes plays, scores goals, hungry, hard, all the things that, are required to be a good player and in the National Hockey League and a good player when it matters. What's interesting now, barring any injury, is that NHL teams, unless Kelowna is up 2-1 with game 4 in progress as we talk now out in Kelowna, just getting underway. And TJ Iginla, if Kelowna doesn't make it to the third round of the playoffs and no injury, he'll play for Team Canada at the U18. Now, wouldn't that be interesting to have the ability to watch TJ Iginla and Cole Yzerman in the same tournament? And
did you draft his father, or when you went to Dallas? Or
yeah, we drafted Jerome. Yeah, we drafted Jerome, and we thought Jerome would be a really good player. We thought Jerome would be a 30, maybe a 35 goal scorer, and a really good player, and a rugged winger, and somebody that drove the net and played along the wall and everything. And we were right, but we were really wrong because he turned out to be way better than we thought he'd be.
Yeah. Caden Primo, we'll end with this. He will get the duty versus the Tampa Bay Lightning tomorrow night. He said several weeks ago, this is just the beginning. You almost get the feeling that he felt something coming, the turnaround in his game. He's been really, really good since then. And I take a look at the Canadiens in goal. Caden Primo, Samuel Montembeault. I went to see Dobesh the other night. He stopped 36, I think. Jacob Fowler, it's well documented, of course, what he's been doing this year with Boston College. Talk about a position of strength. The Canadiens are going to be pretty good in goal over the next couple of years.
Nothing wrong with being strong in that critical area. And I've said this about the Montreal Canadiens depth charts and their prospect cupboard. It's one thing to open up the prospect cupboard and go, geez, there's lots of good prospects. But when you look at the shelves and you look at goaltending and you look at defensemen, and it's different types of defensemen, then you look at the forwards and there's different types of forwards there. Every shelf is stocked. And do I believe that every one of these players will play for the Montreal Canadiens? No, I don't. But when you have when you take the players and you draft them and then you develop them and you're patient with them, and I heard a great interview with Jeff Gorton the other day, giving credit to Marc Bergevin for some of the players that they drafted, and he said, "Now we've come in here, and now what we got to do is build on this. That's our job. That's our mandate." And I think that they've added some really good prospects to the pool. I think they're going to have a great opportunity to be able to assess what they can do. Not only with respect to players coming into the lineup that are in their prospect pool, but to consider options, whether it be with their draft pick or trading prospects, to try to get some players coming in. We've seen them do it. We saw them do it with Doc. We saw them do it with Newhook. So the opportunities we saw them do it with Lehkonen was a little bit different, but that's the opportunities that are going to present themselves for the Montreal Canadiens. It's a great place to be. And certainly, you don't have to rush players along. They were patient with Montembeault. They were patient with Primo. They'll be patient with Dobesh. And they're going to be patient with Jacob Fowler. And the bottom line is when you have quality, Now you can make decisions without creating vulnerability in your organization. Montreal has done an excellent job of building up the opportunity to push forward and at the same time not leave themselves vulnerable in any particular area.
Lastly, the hockey world is talking about John Tortorella's presser earlier today. I know you and I had a chance to have one quick word about it before actually taking this to air, but you like what he had to say today.
I thought it was superb. He used the word transparent and honesty a lot, but he talked about, dealing with the players and being straightforward with the players. And he feels that the only way to do it is by being honest. And, he has no problem with pushback. And by being honest, you got to expect pushback. He says, sometimes I don't know where a conversation's going to go, but I know if I'm being honest, then I got to expect somebody to be honest back with me. And sometimes that makes me sit back and go, okay, maybe I got to think about this a little bit differently. The other thing about John, I know a lot of times we get the sound bites out of his press conferences post game and whatnot, but I think at the same time, he took responsibility and was accountable for saying there's areas that I haven't been very good in this year that I got to recognize and be better. And he feels that their organization, from ownership to Keith Jones, Danny Briere himself, and the players in the group is one where there's transparency, honesty, and where they really want to push forward and help the organization rise up again.
You know what? I'm not the president of the fan club. Having said that, I do believe if the season ended today, I think he's the coach of the year. I don't think any other coach got more out of his team, the team that they are on paper, than Tortorella this year, because I see a lack of depth with the Flyers in goal. I see a lack of depth on defense. I see a lack of depth at the center ice position. I see a lack of depth on lines 3 and lines 4. So I would give him the coach of the year. Having said that, I will say this. I often take it to coaches who always give veterans a pass and never make them sit. So I can't really be upset about Tortorella wanting to sit veterans every now and then, because he seems to be only one of the only coaches that has the courage to do it,
Hey, you used a great word there, courage. Listen, if you want to have a standard of excellence and with it the accountability that goes with it, every single player has to be held to the same standard. I don't care if you're the captain or you're the fourth line winger or you're the seventh defenseman. Everybody has to adhere. John Tortorella doesn't go and blindside anybody. He goes in and he says, hey, this is what we need. We need to be better here. We need to, and he'll give people an opportunity to be better. But if you're not, you're going to be accountable for it. That's exactly what happened with Sean Couturier. And when I hear so many people, oh, you can't do that to a captain. No, you're wrong. You do that to every single player to hold them to a higher level and to a standard of excellence. And that's what John Tortorella does. You don't give anybody a free pass. And that's what you admire about the great coaches.
I don't either, but I'm never going to put you on the bench or make you a healthy scratch because you bring it every single time you're on the Sick Podcast. Craig Button, a terrific scout, a terrific analyst, and an even better person. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you, Tony. I always look forward to Wednesdays.
You're very welcome. I love that top you're wearing. That sweater, that's a brilliant color. Just absolutely brilliant. Thanks so much to Energy Transportation Group. Thank you to La Bita TB. Thank you to Playground. And thank you to Accent Insurance Solutions. Thank you to you, my Sick Army, and you, my Sick community. And if you like the podcast tonight, like it, share it with your friends. Comment Sick, S-I-C-K, S-I-C-K, S-I-C-K. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's our way of feeling the love. For Agnello and Sammy at Master Control, they are Cavallaro. I'm Tony Marinaro. Me.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TB. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.